In our comparing and contrasting lesson with cultures, we are going to take a look at Native American culture in general. This will give you some background knowledge on what their culture is and was like and the different values that they have. Please enjoy and actively think about how this is similar to your life and how it is different.
Native Americans. Do you know who the first people to live in America were? People think it was Christopher Columbus and his crew. Others think it was European settlers or people that came to live here from Europe. But it was actually the Native Americans. Native means they were born in America, though it wasn't called America at the time. This was long before it became the United States. They were here much earlier than Columbus. When Columbus discovered America and its people, he named the people Indians because he thought he was in India. You may have heard other people call them Indians too. The correct term for how we referred to them is Native Americans. The Native Americans lived in both North and South America, including Alaska and Hawaii. There were different tribes and cultures who lived in different parts of the country. A tribe usually consisted of families or communities that spoke the same language and had common beliefs. They also shared the same customs or traditions. Some well-known tribes include the Cherokee, Apache, Cheyenne, Iroquois, the Ute Nation, and Navajo Nation. There were many other tribes as well. Each tribe has its own type of home, foods they ate, tools, clothing, and more. The tribes are no different than people across the world today who have their own cultures and customs. Most historians believe the tribes were quite peaceful before the arrival of Columbus and other Europeans. Native Americans designed their homes according to the weather and area where they lived. A teepee was built using long poles for the frame or structure. The poles were tied together in a bundle at the top. Each of the legs or poles was then spread out, creating a large circle at the bottom. The poles were then wrapped with buffalo hide to protect the people from the weather and to keep them warm. The teepees could easily be taken down and put back up again, making it the perfect house for people who moved a lot. A wigwam was about 8 to 10 feet tall. Like the teepee, it was also made from wooden frames. These frames were covered with sheets of bark from a birch tree. Native Americans also used birch bark to cover canoes because it was waterproof and strong. It was also used for other things like baskets. A wigwam was more rounded than a teepee. Some wigwams were covered with grass. Those were called grass houses. Grass houses were much larger than a wigwam. A longhouse was a permanent home. Unlike the teepee, it was not moved from place to place. It was built from wood and bark in the shape of a rectangle. Holes were created in the roof to allow air to escape. There were doors on both ends of the house, similar to many houses today. Tall poles from trees were curved and then used to create the roof. These houses were also covered with bark. Long houses were about 80 feet long and 18 feet wide and could hold about 20 people. A pueblo was a home built right into the side of a cliff, which is why it was also called a cliff dwelling. These homes were built of bricks made from clay. They sometimes were built inside of caves. Some pueblos were 4 or 5 stories high. Ladders were used to go from floor to floor. These houses could hold many people. Some other types of Native American homes were wattle and daub, plank house, igloo, and chickee. The materials used to build homes depend on where the tribes lived and what was available to use. The clothing that the Native Americans wore were also different from tribe to tribe. If an area where Native Americans lived was warm like Arizona, then less clothing was worn because of the heat. In contrast, in a colder area like Alaska, clothing was layered for warmth. A common
I
material
got a puppy.
was animal skins. The sheep leather of the animal hides was used for shoes as well as covering for some of their homes. Plants and cotton were also used for clothing. Native Americans used the resources around them, like plants, bark, and roots, to create dye. They used the dyes to color their clothing, baskets, mats, and other items. Many tribes hunted buffalo or caribou for food, as well as deer and rabbits. Fishing was widely used to provide food for villages that were close to rivers or streams. Spears, nets, and fish traps were made to catch the fish. In cold regions like Alaska, ice fishing was common. A small hole was cut into the ice and long spears were used to catch the fish. Farming was important to many of the tribes, especially in warmer climates. Main crops included corn, beans, and squash. Native Americans created many beautiful works of art. Pottery is the process of using clay to create handmade pieces. These works of art were not only beautiful but very useful. Pottery was used to store grain and other foods. It was also used to collect water. Colorful baskets, blankets, and carvings such as totem poles or sculptures carved into large tree trunks were created. Some tribes, like the Navajo and Pueblo, were famous for sand paintings. Native Americans also had traditions which included religious and other ceremonies. Stories, music, dancing, games, and sports were enjoyed. Like every people and culture in the world, the Native Americans lived, worked, and played based on their beliefs and customs. Native Americans still live throughout the United States today. Thanks for following Clarendon Learning. Be sure to subscribe for more free resources.
All right. I'm going to ask you to get ready to go share what are some things that you saw that are the same as your culture? And what are some things that you saw that are different from your culture in that video? So, what are some things that you saw that are the same? What are some things that you saw that are different from your own culture? Here are your invites. To hear, what similarities did you find between your culture and the Native American culture? So things that are in common, things that are the same. What similarities? Christopher?
Native Americans, they have houses they live in, and we do as well.
Yeah, we both have houses that are usually built. Yeah, so houses are created for us, or sometimes we can create those ourselves. All right, so we build houses. William, what about you? What did you find that was the same? You're on mute, love. Go ahead and unmute.
What I found that was the same as me and them was that they don't really wear a lot of clothing like we do. Like we'll wear shorts and a shirt.
Yeah, we'll dress for the weather as well. They said Native American cultures that lived in hotter tribes wore less clothing. That tends to be the case for us in the summer as well. Alejandro, what did you find that was similar?
That some people still grow plants like they do.
Yeah, we still have farms that are growing crops and growing plants, and we still consume those plants for food. Great. Levin.
They don't have technology.
So that's a difference. They did not have a lot of the electronic technology that we have today. That is a difference in our culture. Terrence.
We have pots to store food, and they do too.
Yeah, we do. They might look a little bit differently, but we do. We have Tupperware, we have jars, we have pots that we hold things in, just like they did. I heard that they played sports, and it showed some of the Native American boys playing with a ball, and it looked like they were throwing it back and forth. And that made me think of recess. I see us doing that all of the time. So they played many of the same ways. Let's switch to differences. What contrasted or what differences did we find between our culture and Native American culture? What differences did we find? Terrence?
That they um they they lived before us.
Yeah, so now Native Americans are still alive today, but the type of culture that we watched was definitely in a different time period. So, yes, there is a different time period in which we are living right now. What more? What did you notice? What different values? What did you see that was different about their homes, about their art? What differences did we find between Native American culture and our culture? Terrence, something else?
That their houses are smaller than ours.
Typically, traditionally, yeah, it would appear that their houses were smaller. I also noticed their houses were made out of different materials. So they would make their houses out of bark from trees and long sticks. And we don't traditionally see houses in our community in Lawrence made out of those. Leah, what difference did you notice?
That they go fishing with a spear.
Yeah, traditionally, when we see fishing happening in Lawrence, it's with a rod and a line, and they would throw a spear to catch their fish. So the way that they hunted for that food is different. Terrence, something else?
They 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 hunt cows and deer and all of them animals to eat.
Yeah, so there was a lot of hunting for their meat. Traditionally, if we in Lawrence are going to go find meat, we'll go to a store. We won't usually go find a field and kill a cow. We'll usually find our meat at stores around us that has been prepackaged for us. Levin,
They didn't have silky clothes.
they what?
They didn't have silk on their clothes.
Yeah, it didn't appear that they had some different types of underwear. Their fabric was all made out of animal skins. Traditionally, we don't wear animal skins. I'm looking at all of you now and I see most of us are wearing a cotton of some kind, which is actually a plant. So their clothing was made from animals. Ours is traditionally made from plants. Aiden G, close us out. What's one final difference that you noticed?
That they would hunt to make their clothing and for food to eat.
Yeah, when Native Americans hunted, they used every single piece, part, drop, whatever of whatever it was that they were collecting. Whether it was hunting for plant food or whether it was hunting for animals, they used all of it. They didn't just kill and eat the meat, they also used the skin for clothing, they used the bones as tools and weapons, they used the oil for burning. Everything inside of that animal's body had a purpose of some kind. Very good. All right, so we have got ourselves warmed up with Native American culture. That's going to help us with our success target today, which is to compare and contrast the most important points and key details in a text on the same topic. So we're going to read two texts today. One is going to be about the Shawnee tribe, and the other is going to be about the Miami tribe. And we are going to take a look at the comparing or the similarities and the contrasting or the differences between these two tribes. That is our goal today. Here is a short example of how this is going to be completed from Mrs. Renoulet, and she's going to show us a difference and a similarity that she found inside of the same text that you are going to be reading today.
Hey, third grade, this is Mrs. Renoulet.
Let's see if I can turn this up a little bit. It is up all the way.
Today we're going to talk about the skill of comparing and contrasting important points between two texts on a similar topic. We have been talking about our topic of community. We've also been talking about how when people live together, there's the idea of culture. Culture is things we have in common with a group of people, like the food we eat, the ideas we believe, the clothes we wear, and the language we speak. As we've been studying community and culture, we've also talked about the first people in our community. We know that the first people who lived in the United States were called Native Americans. Today we're going to dig a little bit deeper and we're going to learn about two groups of Native American people, two communities of Native Americans. Today the tribes that we're going to talk about, the communities we're going to talk about, are the Shawnee people and the Miami people. Today we're going to look at these two texts and we're going to practice our skill of comparing and contrasting. When I look at these two texts, I notice that both of these tribes live in Indiana. That's where they originally lived. So on my recording sheet, I find the area that says similarities, and I recorded that both tribes lived in Indiana. As I read about the Shawnee people, I'm thinking about how they have a chief, and I notice that it says the title of chief was usually passed down from father to son. When I look at the Miami people, the Miami community, I see that they also have a chief, but in this people group, they say the village elected two chiefs. So this is something different about the Miami community from the Shawnee community. So I can go back to my recording sheet and I can finish typing my details that I found in the text in the differences column. You have seen this recording sheet before. You should have practiced with it already. Please make sure today that you are highlighting your details from the text, just like I have done, before you record your details in the text. So let me finish my job here. Let me go back and finish recording my differences. The Miami people elect two chiefs. Let me type that in. They elect two chiefs. The Shawnee people pass down the name chief from father to son. This is what you're going to do today. You will read more about the Shawnee and Miami people. You will find two ways that they are similar and two ways these communities are different.
Okay, so that is going to be your assignment today. Get out of there. On Seesaw, you will have a text about the Miami and you will have a text about the Shawnee tribes. This is right at the top of your Seesaw response. So please right now go ahead and go to Seesaw in your background and open up a response for comparing two cultures, the Shawnee and Miami. Comparing two cultures, Shawnee and Miami. Go ahead and open that up in your background. All right, guys, we've done 1 and 2 together. You're doing 3. You're going to highlight 2 ways that they are similar and type them on the recording sheet. You are going to highlight 2 ways that the tribes are different and type them on the recording sheet. So that is 4 things that you should type today. 2 similarities and 2 differences. Okay, that's 4 different things that I should see typed. You are also going to describe one thing you like about the Shawnee or Miami culture. I'd like to take a moment and talk about the quality of your responses. So again, notice that on Miami, I didn't just put sun, and on Shawnee, I didn't put elect. This does not tell me about your details. I don't know what this means. But if you were to say the son of the chief became the new chief, now I understand exactly what you're telling me about. If you were to say they elected two new chiefs, now I know what you're saying. So the quality of your responses needs to be more than 1 or 2 words. It needs to basically be a sentence. I should see a sentence in your differences, and I should see sentences in your similarities. Okay? On slide 5, you're going to use the star to tell me if you feel successful with comparing and contrasting, or if you do not yet feel successful with comparing and contrasting, but you're going to keep practicing. On slide 6, you're going to tell one thing that you like about the cultures that you read on slides 2 and 3. Okay? So to quickly recap, you are going to read about the Shawnee people and cultures. So you are going to independently read all of slide 2. You're going to independently read all of slide 3. Then you are going to highlight 2 ways they are similar and type them. So when you turn this in, I should see highlighting. You guys know I'm going to give this back to you if the directions aren't followed. So make sure you highlight and type on the recording sheet. You'll do the same thing for differences. Find 2 differences, use the highlighter, and type them on the recording sheet. Okay? This is your assignment. Are there any